Today I will be speaking on Chelle's behalf. My name is Yvonne Ivey. I'm the TOPS equity lead at NASA headquarters, and today we will be briefing out on equitable access in the year of open science. One thing to note, Chelle should have dropped in the chat a link to one of our IO tools, which is a Q&A. Whenever we have sort of open meetings or chatting with folks, we love to be able to answer your questions. And oftentimes in meetings, we're not always able to kind of pause and answer them immediately. And so please feel free to drop any questions or answers into the IO tool. Our question that we're really sort of posing with this talk is, what are the biggest barriers to adoption of open science? So we'd love to kind of engage with you outside of this meeting. Next slide. All right, so spotting carbon dioxide in a planet's atmosphere is a stepping stone towards detecting life beyond Earth. In September, astronomers found the first evidence of CO2 in an exoplanet's atmosphere. And so if you're looking at the graph on the screen, you'll really be able to see the results that were possible because of NASA's open science principles that were embraced by the exoplanet community. This enabled the rapid discovery using the James Webb Space Telescope data. And this discovery wasn't just enabled by them. Deciding to do open science in one day, this was an open collaboration that was advertised in the years leading up to the data with an open Slack channel that had 340 people active each day. The data from James Webb Space Telescope was made publicly immediately upon collection, and everyone had access without an embargo. All of the data reduction and scientific interpretations could be reproduced immediately through open software and data that were archived across the Zenodo community collection for the James Webb Space Telescope. This article that's linked here was immediately opened on the archive preprint server and then published in the Nature Open Access Journal. And so I'd like to highlight the quote as well as the link that's listed here, and we can add this link in the chat. But NASA's open science guiding principles are centered in our early release science work, supporting an inclusive, transparent, and collaborative scientific process. And that was Dr. Natasha Abathala, who we're quoted here. Next slide. So is all of open science this awesome? And we'll dive into that in the next couple of slides. Next slide. How do we increase trust in science when the public can't access scientific information? How do we combat misinformation when all the scientific information is behind paywalls? In the US, the White House negotiated with publishing companies to provide free and open access for COVID-related publications for a limited period of time. This worked. We got vaccines in a record number of time because of the sharing of information and knowledge. Then monkeypox came along in the next public crisis, and they faced trying to do the same negotiations. But where does this end? Why are we in the middle of a climate crisis and 50% of our information and knowledge is locked behind paywalls? So I always like to include this in the slide because this shows from a global perspective, truly the ability to access and who has access to journals. We pulled this graph from Wiley licenses where they clearly have documented sort of depending on your institution's license access as well as the ability to have access to that information where it falls across the globe. Next slide. So can we build on and extend scientific results? The graphs on this slide show, or rather are taken from a paper from Victoria Stodden in 2018, where she tested 204 scientific papers that were published in the Journal of Science. That's a very high profile journal that showcases the most important results around can we get the data that's promised and whether or not the data that's available. And so you'll see on the slides that 60% of the papers that we know were not made available either through access or request. And based on that, the ability to reproduce those results came in at around 74%, showing that they weren't actually able to reproduce the results because the software wasn't shared, as well as the methodology that described the paper. So this example that you see in these charts are just another example that highlight the difficulty of having access to results and data in high-profile journals, where a majority of folks don't have access to the results, as well as the ability to build upon this. And so this really shows the fundamental flaws in how we do science and the importance of being able to reproduce those results and make them as accessible for all. Next slide. So what can we do about this? This is where open science comes in. So open science is the path to a 21st century science. It's accessible, reproducible, and inclusive. Open science creates research that is cited more, has a bigger impact, increases transparency, and is more inclusive, which means that it is more collaborative, it exposes access to hidden knowledge, as well as creates more equitable systems that enable more participation. Next slide. So this really leads us to NASA's Year of Open Science, which is here now, 2023. And I'd like to highlight many folks across NASA who is supporting leading this community, where we have Dr. Chelle Gentemann, who's the science lead, myself, who is the equity lead, as well as a host of other folks who really keep the ship going. Next slide. And so our efforts have actually led to the White House announcing the year of 2023 as the Year of Open Science. 2023 is the spark that accelerates open science. We need to be open to process doing more science and the results becoming more shareable, as well as knowledge advancing us all. And that is why the White House is dedicating 2023 as the Year of Open Science. And federal agencies and a large coalition of universities have joined us. There are 4 goals that anyone can adopt, from your science team to your department, to your institution, to an organization, as well as yourself. So first, let's think about open science and how we develop a plan to be more open. Next, we'd like for folks to really think about the different types of reviews and how you're involved in such reviews, as well as how do we improve the equity of all of the above, whether we're engaging with underrepresented communities for the advancement of open science or really looking at how we're targeting fundings and evaluations to really break down barriers of entry for all to join. And through all of this, we hope to create a more equitable, impactful, and efficient scientific future for all. So we really look at open science as a spark to change the culture of science. Next slide. So I'd like to pause for a second so that folks can scan the QR code so that you can really learn more about how to access and earn your free NASA Open Science digital certification by completing all of NASA's Open Science curriculum. So our NASA Open Science curriculum is a community-developed introduction to open science with inclusivity, accessibility, and diversity at the forefront. Earning the NASA Open Science certificate indicates to researchers how the key of open science is really access for all of science. Scientists will need to acquire their new skills highlighted in the curriculum to participate in open science effectively and demonstrate those skills when applying for NASA-funded opportunities. NASA is building this curriculum. We'll be hosting workshops, both in person and virtually. We will be hosting summer schools with minority serving institutions, as well as other events to help support the community move toward open science. So please join us and enroll. We'll all be taking this as well, where you can learn how to do science better together. And I'd like to sort of end this talk highlighting Dr. Carl Sagan's quote, "Somewhere, something incredible is waiting to be known." Thank you.